Back to it. Part 2, Konkering Pod, James Beckly. Great first hour conversation. We really enjoyed that. I've got some really good stuff in there. But moving on, we were talking about and sort of moved on to
the culture side of Ward Williams. You were touching on it at the end of part 1. So let's dig into that a bit more. So as you guys grow, as you're growing outside the Southwest and you've got more offices, how are you maintaining your culture within those places across the business?
Oh, part 2 is going to be the hard bit.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough question. That.
Part 2, that's a nasty one to start with. It's really hard. And actually, there's lots of management consultants that are paid a huge amount of money to try to help organizations change, maintain culture. I think and why is that? I guess is the first sort of port of call on that is, as you grow, you get more and more people that come in from different cultures that join your business that think that may quite like the culture they left or may not, but they still have a bias. And so they bring different cultures, different interactions. So you do have to have, I think, advocacy, and you have to have advocates around your business that are really, really on top of what good culture looks like for you as a business. And I think in the Southwest, we've certainly got loads of advocates who've been with the business a long time. So it's arguably a little bit easier. And my, do they tell you when they think we've got it wrong? And they think that we are coming up against culture. And in a funny sort of way, that's a good thing. I hate it because I take it personally. Probably one of my weaknesses, actually going back to part 1, is I do take things probably a bit too personally. But actually that's great because you've got people that will say that's hitting our culture. I'm not sure, I don't like that against our values. But that's much harder. So you've got sort of self-policing, but then when you go to our areas where we've expanded, I don't think we've got the self-policing in place. It's no one's fault. It's just because we've got new people who are bringing slightly different cultures. And so that's a challenge. And that comes down to both sort of the partners who've been and understand the culture need to be seen and be around the business and spend time with people. I think there's something around collateral, and I don't just mean cups and saucers and stuff, but there is an element of that. There is, you see around the business that we've put a lot of effort into our branding side and our values and our messaging. It's a bit subliminal, but actually I think that does land. If people see stuff all the time, that they will occasionally sort of think, what does that actually mean for me? I think we need to do a bit more of that. But I think, ultimately, there isn't some sort of process. I'm sure someone from McKinsey would sit here and say there's a process. I think that's bullshit. I don't think there is a process. I think it's actually about people leading by example, living and breathing. That advocacy is what will make or break your culture. And actually a big part of that is something that we've been working on more recently with the partners, and we're starting to roll it out into our next leadership cohort, is around psychological safety. And a great friend of mine from my MBA days, actually, who I haven't seen for years and years and years, has broken out on his own and is focusing on psychological safety. And that really triggered an interest for me. And he came in and did some quite preliminary sort of workshop with the partners. And I think that is linked to culture. And it goes back to that point that people feel that they can speak up about projects, but also about culture.
What is psychological safety?
So from very, very simply, and Gary will now tell me that I got it wrong on a podcast, but hey, to me, it's many things, but primarily it's that people feel that they have the confidence to be able to speak their mind truly, and speak up without risk and perception of risk. So you create a culture where that they feel that they can challenge, compliment, whatever they feel is the right thing. It's a natural, embedded, symbiotic sort of relationship that people can speak up. It's not about the pips on your shoulder. So someone should be able to say to me, I think on this project, James, we're going the wrong route for these reasons, and they shouldn't think that I'm going to turn around and go, right, that person, their career's over. That's a career limiting moment. So I think, very simply, and I'm on my learning journey with it, it is about people feeling safe and secure.
How do you do
in
that?
Speaking? By being really open and actually being and welcoming those conversations rather than, and it's hard. I mean, it goes back to a point I made right at the start of this, is that, criticism's really hard. Everyone finds feedback, particularly critical feedback, hugely personal. I mean, it's like you put all this effort in and then someone sits there, it feels, they're shooting you down. Well, they're probably getting something wrong in that equation if they're shooting you down. So if you've got the right culture, they should be able to deliver that critical feedback in the right way so that your chimp doesn't go off because you feel that you're being criticized, that you actually go, do you know what? It's a really good point. That's going to move this on. Thank you.
Is it more about learning how to deliver critical feedback, or is it learning about how to accept it?
I think it's both.
Yeah,
I think it's both, because it's two sides of the coin, but it's creating an environment where, at its absolute core, where people just know that they can be completely authentic and be themselves. And that's a big part of it, because actually you want a diverse workforce.
Yeah.
And just because someone might be abrupt doesn't mean that abruptness, that's just
bad.
them. So you have to sort of be able to go, well, that's just their nature. They don't take it personally. But that requires work. All of this requires work in a busy world where your day job is delivering fees, delivering for clients. So it can seem like a side hustle. And that sort of goes back to the sort of psychological safety piece, but actually around culture. But it is really, really, really important that people are guardians of it. It doesn't mean that it can't evolve. I must admit, which might seem as though I'm now confusing the picture. I think cultures can evolve a bit, but it needs to evolve in the right way. It's not overnight.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really challenging, and we're very much, but I'm acutely aware of that.
Has the culture changed since you've been here in charge?
I think inevitably, I could sit here and give you some pants answer and say that, no, it hasn't. It's exactly as it was in 1974. It's inevitably changed because it's a bit like sort of a multicultural society. We've just become more diverse, and with more diverse thinking and people from different backgrounds, inevitably, as they stay with us longer, it's not so much people who flit in and out of businesses move on every 2 years, but your people who stick with you are there 5-10 years. They're the ones that really create culture, and they're the ones you've got to sort of look after. And I think, it's changed, but for good and for bad. So there's definitely some bits of it that you go, it's not quite right. We need to sort of try to evolve that a bit. We need to tweak that. But there are other bits that I think we have kept. Everyone talks about it. Every business will talk about family first, but that's a big part of our culture. It's not written in all of our packages, but everybody knows that when you're in a crisis and in need, and I'm talking about some, I can't go into details, but some really, really big moments in people's lives, the business has absolutely, within 10 minutes, stood by their side. There's no paperwork or it's just a decision that's like, no, it's the right thing to do. And that sums us up, that we'll always look after our staff in a when it really comes to the crunch. Everybody, even if they're really annoying, we'll look after them.
And there's no one that is.
And there's no one that is.
Go on, you had a question.
I was just going to ask, do you kind of champion those conversations across the offices, like the honest and open feedback, or the well dones on
how's it done?
Yeah, how is it done?
Maddie, I would love to say I'm everywhere and I'm championing it and I am at the heart of it. But the truth is, one, I can't be, and two, I'm not. I'm probably failing in that. I probably should get around the business a bit more. I don't. I'd love to be. But in reality, when you really take a step back, that's just incidental. If I'm stepping in, I'm never going to change anything. It's just a touch point.
Yeah.
I probably need to be a bit conscious in how I of the scene I may set or the way I behave, but ultimately it's for our teams. So the best way I can describe our culture is there is a bit of a framework that is sort of stems from where we've come from, and I think that does exist in our DNA. But definitely within each office there is a subculture. And that's celebrated. And that's sort of linked, I might sound again a bit confusing, but it does link back to that is our culture, that doesn't bother people. So this office we're sitting in Exeter is completely different to our Plymouth office or a Truro office or our Winchester office. And they're all the same. And that's celebrated actually, but within a sort of boundary of Ward Williams-ness. And so I think that bit we've sort of got right. We don't try to sort of put a corporate flyer down that's sort of saying thou shalt follow it this way, because this office is quite a good example. There are some of the leaders in this fraternity are quite wild. They're different. I mean, they're the nicest possible way, but that's cool. That's fine. And I wouldn't want to change that. And in fact, I think whenever it's been challenged, there's been kickback because it's their culture. So we've learned that. So it's cool.
It's the most realistic way, I suppose, that you can have a culture in so many offices continuing to grow, isn't it?
I think so. And I think, a bit that we do need to probably work on as a business is, and it is probably a bit more of the sort of management side of it is, yes, there's the softer side of culture, but actually there is also a side where you get PDRs or reviews with people. You do need to, and if there are some form of sort of objectives, you need to be starting to flow those values, that culture through those processes and systems. And again, David is brilliant at that sort of stuff. And he's working on that to make that better. So hopefully that will cement where we want to go. And that's probably where we'll end up, just refining, keeping it, making sure that it's discussed and it's talked about. So there is a bit of process in the background, but largely you just got to let people be.
Yeah.
And trust them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, should we move on to more of the winning work?
Yeah. Something I'm really interested in. This is, going quite businessy, but what's the focus for you, with business development? Is it relationships or more process? And how do you go about growing the business by adding?
So the way that we've built the business to date is it's been a very organic process. It's just we've backed an individual in a new area for 2 or 3 years and just grown it very slowly around a couple of key clients that they may have bought with them. We really try not to put too much pressure on them. We do it together. We're in it together, and we'll grow around them. And that has worked really well, and it's seen us grow from a £5 million business to a 15-16 million pound business relatively rapidly. That sort of very start small, cost effectively, back them. Doesn't matter if it takes 2 or 3 years. I think there is a bit more of an imperative that we just need to sort of, when we try to convert it, do it a little bit quicker, which means that there is a bit of investment that's required to do that. So I think that's a big part of the sort of growth strategy. And who knows, in time, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'm having conversations with the bank, or, how do we create that growth? If it's the right thing to do and there's a compelling reason, how can we leverage, debt better or whatever? I think, we've been quite, to date, for all the right reasons, we've not really leveraged debt. We've not, we've avoided that. But actually, I think as you get bigger, those sorts of questions become, well, actually, maybe we should in that area or in that side of the business.
So you mentioned, I think earlier, 85% of your business is repeat business.
Yeah.
Why is there a reason why there's a shift maybe towards a bit more intentional growth now, for these new areas, these different sort of locations? Is that?
Yeah, this is very much a sort of personal view of growth, because I often laugh because you hear people sort of say, well, we're going to consolidate. I guess if you're a massive corporation, consolidation has a meaning. But a business like ours, the journey's the fun, you know? And so if I sat around the table and said, hey, we're going to consolidate, well, it's a bit dull, isn't it? What does that mean? You know, we're going to consolidate to maintain margin, and there's loads of competition because there's more competition, particularly in the Southwest. You know, what we're going to consolidate, and well, no, you know, I mean, you're just going to fail. That's just a recipe. So I think you have to keep pushing, and you have to keep wanting to grow or diversify, whatever it may be. So I think that's a really important approach. Otherwise, you know, of course, equally, if economically you've got to make tough decisions, and we have, you know, not that long ago been through some moments where we will make quick decisions and think, actually, no, we do have to reduce headcount because actually, you know, the market dictates, and that's always really hard with some of the stuff we talked about in the first part, where, you know, culture, people, but that is also custodianship. Actually, is the fact that, you know, the board, and we will never shy away from making those difficult decisions, because actually there are, you know, hundreds of families that are relying on us to make those right decisions. I've slightly digressed, but
no, it makes sense. How would you, like, you know, be very intentional about that?
There's two parts to it. There's bringing the right person in and culturally who fits both with the staff and the team that they will inherit, but also crucially with the leadership team that they will be interacting with and we're backing. So there's got to be a huge amount of trust quite early. And that's really hard. The individuals that you bring into the business at a very senior level, I've never, and we, the board, have never been frightened of bringing in people who are better. That is actually right at the heart of how Woods has grown anyway. So that person that's coming in, you know, we know very well they are far better than I am, and I'm not frightened of that. That's super cool, and that's going to push us on. And actually, the even the team that are coming up and stepping up to being EPs, they're better than all of us. That's really important. We shouldn't be frightened of that. You have to accept that. And then you, as a team, as a collective, you complement each other. So it's that sort of complementary skill set, not being adventurous, being brave, not worrying about bringing in people. Because a lot of SMEs and smaller businesses do worry about bringing in people. One, the pennies it costs. But two, you worry about it culturally and, well, I'm the boss, it's my business. Well, that's if you think about it, that's a bit limiting, isn't it? I mean, you know, bring in people, surround yourself by people who are better than you.
In terms of like the end goal for London or other regions that you're growing into, would the end goal be something like creating a project like you did with Mace and Wood Williams joint venture in Cornwall? Is that kind of like optimum?
Yeah, no, Maddie, that's a really good question. I mean, I'm a big advocate that you know, our growth needs to be never be frightened of teaming up with a bigger organization that provides the same services, because, you know, we will bring something to the party. And with MWJV, the relationship with Mace, I mean, it has been so successful. And I think on both sides, we've taken a lot. I mean, they're a massive organization, been through some recent change, but actually, you know, we've learned a lot from them. I think, you know, at a local level, they've learned stuff from us as well. And we've helped them. You know, we've provided resource and skills and local knowledge. And, you know, something like Cornwall, for example, local knowledge is really important because it's a peninsula. There's only one way in, and that's quite unusual. And that means that sometimes people are surprised by the cost of doing work down there, and they think they can do it cheaper. Well, yeah, you might be able to, you know, in the southeast. Actually, you might find Cornwall's nearly at southeast prices. So, you know, it's not uncommon. So I think those relationships are really important, those partnerships, and I'll always look to explore them. The other part of growth in my mind, and a lot of people forget this, is, you know, when you talk about clients, everyone thinks, you know, RD&E, the NHS, you know, a developer. Yeah, they are. They're absolutely gold-plated, fantastic. You've got to look after those clients. They are, but they take a long time to win and to support and to nurture. Actually, we've also got clients in architects, engineers, that you know, planning advisors and consultants, agents. They're all our clients too. And if we look at it like that, they have opportunities, and they said, you know, I'm looking at this site. You know, would you be able to do a quick estimate? and we'll do a quick estimate free of charge. And that's actually really important in terms of providing that opportunity. And they go, that was fantastic. The Wards guys did that. And if that job then comes off, you get the introduction to the client. So that's how we also are looking to grow. And I think most businesses do the same, but that's really important to us, is those relationships with our other partners.
Yeah.
It's super important.
A collaborative approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk to us a bit more about the MWJV project then, because obviously Cornish roots and a massive Cornish project. How did that go down? How did you get it in the first place?
So that was pretty much early doors when I rejoined Ward Williams. The Cornwall Council framework was coming up for renewal, and it came out, and we felt the best way of responding to a single supplier type approach rather than a panel of suppliers was Ward Williams on its own probably wouldn't have been successful, and it represented a significant part of our Truro office turnover, about 1.5 million of turnover, between 1.3 and 1.5 million pounds worth of turnover in Cornwall. And actually we realised that we could lose all of that, but actually by combining forces with a really bigger organisation that would provide, intelligence, provide additional resource, all sorts of things, that made sense. So that was when we sort of came together. And initially it was going to be a tri-party venture between Ward Williams, Arcadis and Mace, but unfortunately it didn't quite work out, and no hard feelings at all, but actually it meant that we focused with Mace. And I have to say it's been a I'm sad that it's coming to an end, but we are looking at other opportunities to do together. It's been really, really successful. And, it's definitely had a positive impact on the community in Cornwall and wider, actually. But,
hugely. I mean, I've got some of the stats here: 242 jobs created, 27 apprenticeships, 215 careers events, 42.6 million spent locally. Like, that's fantastic, isn't it?
No, it really is. And I think sometimes, you have to really think about that. But that's a hell of an impact that a joint venture has done. And, like all things, there's been challenges, but and we'd be lying if we didn't say that. But overall, you look back, I think that there's been a lot of good delivered. It's been a really important part of the business, and the future is, how do we then backfill? So that's a big part of the work that the team have really been doing the last couple of years. And the good news is that we're now backfilling in different ways. So
is that something that can be like replicated in other locations, other areas? Because it's a very, I suppose you guys like very much, you're strong in the southwest, aren't you? Like Cornwall very much being that. Can that be taken like other areas, other locations as well?
Definitely.
Is that the plan?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always open to having conversations, and, without going into names, I'm talking to lots of other businesses, both competitors and architects, about how we can work together. I'm really not frightened. I think some businesses are quite protective of that.
Yeah.
We are not protective at all around that. There'll be boundaries, there'll be rules, but you set the rules and you talk about it in a really open way. Actually, it should work.
It's quite a curious thing, isn't it? Because like direct competitor, you could say, couldn't you? That's what's so strange. Like, how do those conversations come about? Is it out of necessity, or
it's out of necessity to a degree? So the Cornwall Council one was, I think, if we're honest, out of necessity. It was a good idea, but it was out of necessity, and it worked really well. I think some of the others, it's the same. You sort of go, as a single entity, what is our value proposition? Mm-hmm. Probably doesn't work. Rather than saying, well, it doesn't work and walking away, we would tend to approach it by going, well, okay, it doesn't work with just us, but actually if we did it like this, that might be compelling. And then you go and talk to someone. And actually, in fairness, it's not just us. Our friends and partners, architects, will also make suggestions in conversations, say, well, have you thought about working with these guys? And that very much open to it. But whilst maintaining our individuality, that's also really important.
Has it been something which has actually really helped you, like, grow the business?
Yes.
Would you say?
Yeah. I mean, it would be lying. MWJV was really important and helped grow. Although, it was part replacing what we were already doing and had been doing since 1974. But it has that openness to partnerships, I think, has been a big part of our growth and probably actually an improvement in our skill set. So Yeah, no, it's big.
I'm not
part.
sure if it's a bit of a naive question, but is that something which happens like a lot in construction and like with consultants?
Contractors do it relatively frequently. They're less territorial on that sort of stuff. They recognise when coming together can be both in the UK and internationally right at the start of this pod. But so I think they're much better, a bit more mature. I think the very large consultancies, they're completely au fait with joining forces on huge frameworks. I think for SMEs linking in, the danger is where it's done badly is where a large organisation will come to you and say, we're bidding this framework, will you be on our panel?
Yeah.
Well, so what actually happens is they use the SME tag and they get a tick in the box done, but then you never see any work. That is the norm, which is actually pretty appalling, actually. It's something that gets me quite fiery that people are using that SME tag, and then those that are then looking to award against criteria are allowing that to slip through the net, and that happens far too much. And that's probably been the norm historically. I think more recently, people are looking at slightly harder relationships, more solid foundation. But it's relatively uncommon for an SME to be doing joining forces.
What are like the benefits for you then? Like from like just a few benefits from like a business point of view, because we've like listed off all the benefits for like the area Cornwall, which is great, obviously. But like
as a business, it's I think it's huge. It's access to a client or a framework that you wouldn't have readily had if you'd done it. So that's access to income. Yeah. It's access to resource and skills that are complementary in one sense, but also there'll be people that have got, I mean, some of these organizations have got people that are, mind-bendingly bright and clever with really amazing experience that you can draw on. And so therefore, you might be doing local delivery, but suddenly you're bringing in an expert that can really help a client drive change. So that's a big part of it. And then clearly the obvious one is the resource pool. I mean, suddenly you've got more people that you can call upon. But I think it has a massive part. And for Ward Williams, we've taken learnings and developed our processes and procedures as part of those relationships. So
it's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Definitely sounds like that. Should we move on to the B Corp stuff?
Yeah.
Go on, Maddie.
First chartered surveying practice in the world to become B Corp.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big statement,
that is.
isn't it?
And thank you, because actually no one ever really sort of picks up on that. And I think we take it for granted a bit. I must talk to Ian Tweedale about that, actually. He needs to make more of a thing of it. But I'm always staggered, because actually it was an achievement. And we have been recognised, and we had the last Queen's Award. There's all sorts of things that came off the back of it. So I'd slightly jest. But it is an amazing thing, and I think that leans and points heavily to the cultural piece. And I have to say, at the outset, the board was probably a bit cynical, but Andy Snapes was absolutely passionate that this was the right thing to do.
What were they cynical about?
They were cynical that was this more of a badge? That what value does it really add to us as a business, and isn't it just a bit like an ISO, and a QA type, QC type accreditation, and actually it's not. And Andy did a really good job of demonstrating with us another advisor that advised the board, a guy called Chris Hines, who was a founder of Surfers Against Sewage, and Chris and Andy were really, really big advocates, and credit to the team, they listened. And we decided that it was the right thing to do, it's been really good, and I think far more than opportunities to grow the business, what it has provided us is that it is a real life. I was like a sort of monkey on my shoulder and on the board's shoulder that will sort of say, are you doing the right thing? We've got our impact report, actually there are challenges out there, and are we trying to change those things? Are we trying to make the right decisions? And we don't claim to be perfect. So, the impact report's 5 out of 10. We're saying we're 5 out of 10. And we're pretty good. We've, if you were to look at the scores on B Corp, we're pretty good. But the reality, that's irrelevant. we've got loads more to do. So it's a very dynamic, live, external accreditation that they're coming in and saying, how are we doing? And it's a really tough process to get through. And heaven forbid, I would be dreadful at being involved in that. Unfortunately, others who are better prepared are able to work with the B Corp team. But it is a really hard thing to get. And I think for us as a business, our scope 1 and 2 emissions for a consultancy business are a piece of cake. And so that's why we sort of say 5 out of 10, because actually for us to manage a little fleet of cars and some fairly small offices, our footprint's relatively small. Scope 3 is much, much more interesting because we're not a manufacturing business, so it's easy to look good. But for us to influence our Scope 3 suppliers and relationships and subcontractors, that's much harder. And that's where we're really trying to focus, is how can we make an impact in that area and reduce our Scope 3 emissions. So that's much harder. And that's because of B Corp. Going back to your original question, that's because B Corp is making us look at it. That's got to be a good thing. And actually, sorry, the one thing about B Corp, in some respects, we were having a debate at the last board meeting because sustainability is coming under the spotlight at the moment. Sustainability, net zero is all under pressure. And I'm not going to go into my personal views about what we need to do, but it's under pressure. And how many clients need sustainability advice, etc. And we are having debates. Is it still a service? Are people just going to say in this economic climate and political macro climate, is it important? I think it's more important now than ever, and it's now for us to hold our nerve and continue to be a B Corp, which we will, but also to try to gently prod and help our clients make the right decisions for their projects.
Do your clients and suppliers still feel like it's as important as ever at the moment?
No, I think there's been a bit of a change. I genuinely think people are starting to think, well, it's not quite so important now.
Is it also a financial thing as well? Because I recruit and do a lot of sustainability into that as well. So I'm always having these conversations. I'm just like out of curiosity as well. But like, is it a money thing too? Like, is it more expensive? Is it still more expensive to like put in?
I wish Paloma was sitting next to me.
Yeah,
because she's much better at being an advocate.
But are you finding that? Because I'm maybe having conversations with a lot of like the sustainability consultancies, that sort of stuff I work with is, some are saying, because things are a little bit tighter at the moment. The economy is not as good as what it once was when B Corp was really big, blah, blah, blah. That maybe some clients are seeing it as a bit of a luxury and they may be, spending money in other ways. Are you seeing that, or have I got that completely wrong?
No, definitely. Because the economics don't stack up. So there is a perception. It doesn't always have to be the way, but there is a perception that it's more expensive. And in some cases it does add some on cost, but there is a perception that it's a massive on cost. But it's about how you approach it, both in a sort of a hard and a soft way, in terms of the both technical and other things that you can do on a project to reduce it. But when your viability, take the Southwest, for a private developer to come down here and build some office space, it's not easy. It's not easy. Go to Plymouth and build office space. Go to Plymouth and build residential apartments. It's hard. It's really hard. And our local authorities are trying to work out how to do that. So yes, I know that they've all got target. They all want to do the right thing, but they've also got a very real housing problem. They've got very real financial challenges as organisations. So what gives? Well, something has to give. You can't do it all. And there are choices. And I think a lot of our political leaders are talking about that. There are choices that need to be made. And so I do think that it's not top of the agenda for a lot of clients.
Or slip down on the agenda.
Yeah, it's not top of the agenda. Yeah. It's not that it's not important. That would be a disservice to everybody.
Yeah.
But I just think that ultimately, when it comes down to it, if something's got to give a bit, that will be an area that they will look at. what we've got to try to do, and where Paloma has developed Pathfinder, is to say, well, actually, it doesn't need to have a massive cost impact. Actually, there are different ways of looking at it. So, you know, and actually, my final point would be, you know, architects and engineers are brilliant at this as well. They love a challenge, and loads of the partners and friends we work with, they are amazing when they're unleashed. So, you know, we mustn't give up. We mustn't,
definitely. Oh, it's more important for these sort of things now. And it's not at the top of everyone's minds, isn't it?
Absolutely. So we've got to keep pushing. We need to be realistic as well.
Yeah.
You know, I've always felt that we've got to be realistic with what we're trying to achieve, but no, we can't give up. It's too important.
With you guys, you know, going out to like, you know, your suppliers, that sort of thing. Obviously, that sounds like that's like the third level.
The scope 3.
Scope that you're saying that's like pretty high up on your agenda there when you're choosing suppliers.
From our sustainability team, that's pretty important. Part of what we're trying to achieve.
Does it go as far as like discounting people for not having sustainability credentials? Like if a client came to you and you had these sort of things?
That's a really good question. I could give you a slightly bullshitty answer and say, of course, you know, I know from a process perspective it should, but I think actually in reality, if I was to speak to our construction management team, for example, they will try to work with suppliers and try to educate and sort of say, well, have we thought of it like this? And try to do things differently. Yeah, the reality is, you know, we've still got to build projects. We've still got to. There's such community need for, you know, whether it's hospitals, housing, you know, places for different demographics to live. You know, there are some real challenges out there, and the built environment's right at the heart and centre of this. So, you know, we've got to wrestle with this to do the right things. But what we shouldn't do is, through being dogmatic, stop things from being created as well. So we need to be pragmatic about our approach.
I appreciate the honest answer there, because you're right. It's so easy to sit there and like just say all the right sort of things, isn't it? But you've got to be realistic.
We do. We have to be completely realistic.
And ultimately, it's just about doing the best that you can.
And have the conversations. And as long as, you know, as long as we're having the conversations and we're having really good conversations, and it's not just Ward Williams. I mean, you know, Ward Williams are a part of a team. You know, they're amazing architects, as I said, architects and engineers that are also trying to have those conversations. But ultimately, the viability of something being built and it's needed is just, you know, it's so important.
I suppose that kind of helps your emphasis of the point of B Corp not just being a badge when you have to have those conversations with people. Having a B Corp certification isn't stopping from other things happening if they don't have the sustainability credentials. It's just educating, like you say, and that's part of you know what you have to do with that certification, isn't it?
Yeah,
no,
definitely.
Difficult question. What sort of things are like you guys doing then for this B Corp certification?
What are we doing?
Yeah, is there like
what do you mean?
Like practical examples
Bounce
of things
back to you for a second.
Any practical examples of things that you've had to change, or?
Well, you know, we've absolutely root and branch. I mean, were we tracking our carbon emissions? No.
Stuff like
that. Were
we
tracking our travel to work? Not effectively. Are we giving people the best options for alternative forms of transport? Probably not. Are we tracking our impact and pro bono work effectively? Are we providing enough? I mean, those are just examples of the types of conversations that people might have with me, but, you know, Paloma and the team are wrestling with to try to, and actually it's not just Paloma, it's all our office managers, to try to make sure that we're leaving a positive footprint. So it does force some very tangible discussions, and then obviously the scope 3, scope 2, scope 1 type stuff.
Yeah. And the reason why I ask is like, because I suppose every business has to do different things, don't they? The B Corp branch. So it's curious for like other people to understand what sort of things you guys actually have to do that.
I hasten to add, I really don't want us to be put up as some shining example, because, you know, we're not a steel manufacturing plant where it's really hard. You know, we're a fairly small consultancy. It's relatively straightforward for us to do our bit. And I think that, you know, we're doing our bit. We're probably going a bit further. We're very proud of that. But we mustn't over-egg that by comparison to some of the amazing work that are likes of Kier or Wilmot Dixon, you know, to name just two. Those are the contractors. I mean, it's much harder for these contractors, and they're doing groundbreaking work. So I am slightly, I'm probably always a little bit, just because I think what we're doing is great, but our baseline is not difficult. It's much harder for the big contractors or the manufacturers. So
a big point actually I've taken away from this conversation is like the word journey for you. Like you've mentioned that so many times. Like again, like with the B Corp certification, like the LLP, like the custodianship, like it's more about the journey than the end goal.
Yeah,
it's all about the journey for you.
Yeah, because you got to have fun.
Yeah, and that is the fun bit. You're right.
You know, actually,
you don't have fun when you get
I
there,
don't get up in the morning and go, I want to go to work and be miserable. I want to go to work and, you know, it will be dynamic, it will be different, and it is a journey, and both a personal journey for me, because I'm genuinely learning all the time. But also I hope for everyone involved in the business, it's a bit of a journey. And journeys by their nature, everyone has a slightly romantic view that if you're on a journey, it's a holiday. You know, it's sort of slightly exciting. It's exciting, but there
Flipping
are bumps. There's bumps, you know, and it's hard, and you have choices, and there's slightly different directions, and that's what makes business great fun. You know, and that links really to the next generation. You know, sometimes I think business, particularly in this political environment, actually, business gets a bit of a bad rep. You know, being in business and running a business should be massively respected. You are providing jobs and livelihoods for people, and that comes with pressure and strain, and that should be applauded in my view. And most countries, lots of countries, absolutely applaud their businesses. And I think in this country we've lost sight of that a little bit. You know, actually, it's hard running a business because you're on a journey or whatever you want to call it, but it is hard. And I think that sometimes people forget that those people that are willing to lead businesses, they're doing something that's super exciting, but it's hard at times.
Very much so.
I think that's a perfect way to round it up, James.
Leave it there. Let's finish.
Thank you,
James.
Thank you
Thank
I've
very
loved
much.
it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on.